So I might start off with a particular cartoon. And it's actually emphasising how important data is for us. In this particular thing, it's saying, look, half of it's missing. We need the data. We need the data for the validation and also the reproduction of the experiment. Having a publication by itself isn't sufficient. So what I'm trying to do in this particular presentation is give you a bit of the background in my university that affects us in data management, some of the strategy behind the components that are actually put in place, and to give you a quick snapshot of what's actually happening at Monash. So what do researchers care about the research data? And it's quite straightforward. Most of this is familiar to you. First of all, they need to safeguard their research, and they don't want to lose it. At the moment, they're putting it on USB sticks, all sorts of things, and it's very easy to lose these USB sticks. And other forms of data don't last as long as DNA. Most of it starts to decay after about 3 years or so. Also, it's important for the researchers to come up with new research outcomes. With some of this new data, or being able to access old data, they're actually finding new research outcomes. So that's another important one. The other thing that we know about is dealing with the data deluge. You know, there's large amounts of data being born digitally these days, and we have to do something about it. And it affects a lot of our researchers. Also, validating their research. We know that for many particular researchers, they're starting to put in stuff into publications. Sometimes, I know one example, in Nature, there was a fabrication of results. And the researchers in that particular space feel very strongly now about putting the raw data up to validate their actual research outcomes. And of course, down the bottom, the conformance to the funding bodies' policies, the policies within inside of the institution, legal requirements, as well as codes and that come up. The institutional perspective, of course, is slightly different. It's there to sort of help the researchers achieve their research ambitions, to provide the ability for them to do leading-edge research, you know, more about their reputation, to increase the number of outcomes from the research that's actually done there. Also, we know that when people are dealing with different sorts of data, ethical issues and also legal issues, and they want to be able to keep track of that. Many researchers at the moment, they know that when they sign the dotted line, they've agreed to a particular legal binding agreement, but when you sort of look back at it, they sort of forget it as they actually go and conduct the research. And they sort of need to be reminded of those particular obligations. Also, from an institutional perspective, if we have the best research infrastructure, enabling researchers to do something different they've never been able to do before, we're going to attract the best researchers as well. And also, by doing this good work, we can also hopefully attract more research income. So Monash University, in a nutshell, it's on Australian standards, it's quite large. I'm sure many of you are sort of saying that's not a very large number of academics. It's quite diverse. We've got faculties around Victoria. We've got 10 faculties, and we've got many campuses around Victoria. And we've also got campuses around the world in Malaysia, South Africa, and we've also got very much a presence in China now. It's quite research intensive, once again, relative to the Australian setting. And when we sort of think about research data, we have a very broad understanding of what research data is. We don't care about the content, we don't care so much about the format, and it's more about the actual observations, findings and outcomes from the data. The other thing is that the university that I'm from has a very strong reputation in research data management. We've been doing it over for 7 years now, and some of it even started a lot later than that. So Monash University, the good thing I find in my university is that the senior management basically get it. And this is sort of a summary of the sort of how they see it, and they agree with this particular statement. They think that by doing this, we're going to come up with new research outcomes, enhance the research practices, facilitate collaborative research. Also, the university aims to be a leader in this particular space. And the other thing is that when we do research data management, because it's such a large and diverse area, it's going to be different in different areas. So you have to devolve some of that responsibility. And within inside my institution, we're seeing that happen now. Also, what's really important about the data management, it has to line up with the higher level strategies in the university, the research strategy, as well as the education strategy and others that are important. And that's what we've done. Snapshot of the Australian environment. About 2007, a code was put out for researchers and their conduct. And this was important for the integrity for research. It didn't have any bite to it, but many of the universities actually signed on to this. And it's actually helped us push the research data management agenda in universities. Many researchers actually agree to it, agree with the aspects that are actually in it. Also, the university's got a very strong publication history and also strong publication repository community. The only thing is that we don't have these large discipline repositories like you do have here in Europe. I think there's only the one in the social sciences that's actually strong at the moment. Also, like in the US and the UK, there's actually a mandate now for data management plans, but that's not so in Australia. That could change in the future, but at the moment it's not a driving force for us. We've also got a large amount of funding that's coming through from the Australian government, and it's actually funding many different areas. Many of you have heard of the Australian National Data Service. Also, we've got another group that actually looks at collaborative research and providing infrastructure for that. And we've also got a large amount of money that's actually been put into data storage all around Australia, and I'll show you that in a minute. The other thing that's come in is we've actually got, within inside of our grants now, both from the medical funding body as well as from the Australian Research Council, there's now very strong statements about making at least the publication available and encouraging actually having the data to be made available as well. We know in the coming years, and it probably won't be too long, that they'll move to the next level. They'll be expecting it and probably very much requiring it in the next 3 to 4 years. So we have to keep moving in this particular direction. I mentioned before that there's a lot of money being spent in Australia on collaborative research infrastructure as well as data storage infrastructure. And this map actually shows you around Australia that there's quite a lot going in. There's nodes of 10 to 20 petabytes going into each of the capital cities. This is Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne down here, New South Wales and Brisbane. There's also sort of some other more regional areas, and they're getting quite a large amount of data storage for that particular area as well. So that's great because a lot of universities now have their own research data storage, but it's also being augmented by national storage as well. You'll also notice on this, there's a whole lot of compute that's going around the country as well. And I'll talk a bit more about why that's really important when it comes to research data. Now, this is a very simplistic life cycle for research data management. Many of you have probably seen this before or seen it in some form. But you think about it, when we go and do research, first of all, we come up with an idea, and then we go and design an experiment that's suitable for that particular hypothesis. We go and do the experiments, we then analyse the results, we find something interesting, we start talking to our colleagues internally, and then outside the university, we produce a paper, and then we go and publish it. And then we don't just publish it, we also want to actually export it to particular areas that are actually communities that are interested in this sort of thing. And so we expose it to those. And how does research data management infrastructure come into this? Well, the planning's got a lot to do with the design aspect of it. Something that I actually term a research data management platform, and that covers the capturing the data, analysing the data, sharing it with others, and that publication aspect. And also in the final area, it's more about that exposure. And you're exposing it, you could be exposing it to national repositories, institutional repositories, community portals, or electronic journals. Sort of looking at the infrastructure and that goes into a university, you've basically got discovery infrastructure, and I just mentioned those before. I just mentioned the research data management platforms. That's basically where the researchers engage and do the work. But they also need to rely on data capture things as well. So from the instruments directly, from compute, you might actually go and do an analysis, and that's actually being recaptured in batch deposits, and also the reuse. You're actually going to have a whole lot of repositories around the place, and they'll be part of your capture as well, out of the reuse extent. We've also got a concept of market and vault. I don't know if that terminology is very familiar here, but it's more about that working space being the market area, and the vault being more of that archival space, and we sort of split it up into two. And also the supporting infrastructure here, having a website, and also data management components as well. But when you sort of look at what an institution really needs to do, the one here in yellow is the only one that a university really has to provide The ones in red basically have to be provided by outside the university, and the ones in orange can be provided by the university, or they can be provided outside of the university. So, when we think about, well, what infrastructure do we have to do next? Well, some of us can really sort of do not much at all if there's other components that we can actually leverage off locally. And this is a sort of a snapshot of the landscape. I sort of think of it like this. It's really early days still. A lot of people are thinking it's advanced, but it's still early days. What we thought about research data management a few years ago is very different to the way we think about it now. And I'm sure in 3 years' time it's still going to be different still. And the ideas and that you'll see in this presentation are more of how I see it at the moment. So just about researchers, they're very focused on their research outcomes. They don't work in analytical modes, they work in a very interpretive way. For them, things are open-ended. It's a very ambiguous space. They work in an iterative sort of way, and they have to, because they have to keep changing the way they're going. All of a sudden, someone comes up with a new research outcome, it's impacting on the work they're currently doing, and they have to take a different direction. Or they're relying on an instrument, and all of a sudden, that instrument's not going to be available and online until another 3 or 5 years, so they have to take a different direction there. So they've got to be dynamic in the way they work. The other thing is that with researchers, they belong to an institution, but they're generally actually more loyal to their community than their actual institution. And so when we build infrastructure for researchers in an institution, we sort of push institutional infrastructure on them. That's not such a good way to go, because that'll actually break out their collaboration with their colleagues outside. So we have to sort of keep that in mind when we're actually doing infrastructure. Also, when they have infrastructure needs, it's not necessarily going to be forever. Sometimes they just need it for a very short period of time. They've got one particular research outcome they want to prove, they want to build it, run it, and at the end of the day, they're finished with it. They don't want to ever use it again. And they're very resource driven, and resourceful and very driven in what they want to do. And what you find is that if you don't give them what they need, they'll find other ways to actually do it. And as I showed you with the other slide before, there's lots of components that can actually come from outside of the university now, or can be provided by, provided in the cloud or through national offerings and that. So a lot of the time, the researchers are now, they're almost in a position where they can very easily do their own thing. They don't need the institution to do it for them at all. So how does this sort of affect how we think about selecting a particular research data management platform? And you think about it, with the researchers, they've got different environments, different tools, different cultures and all that. And if we're trying to provide a research data management platform that's going to fit them all, it's just not going to work. There's going to be a gap, and that's why I've got the mining the gap image there. So the way I see it is there's not going to be a single RDM platform that's going to suit all researchers within inside the university. The other thing is, I mentioned before, it's got to be a really good cultural fit. The other thing is that with these systems, we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. And also, when you develop new products from scratch, it's very expensive, and you also need to build community. So there's a lot of work taking that particular path. So my suggestion is, if you're actually looking for a research data management platform to help your researchers, go out and find out what's out there. If that's what the particular community is using, and the researchers actually agree with it, then go and adopt it. It's much easier path to take than actually trying to roll it yourself and get others to come on board with it. There's also a lot of infrastructure that's actually similar to your needs, and you may be able to adapt an existing solution to meet your needs as well. Also, if you build it on somebody else's code base, obviously you can get some support benefits there. As a very last resort, I'd actually develop it from scratch. Now, thinking about this from an institutional perspective, it's quite a scary thought, knowing there's so many disciplines inside of a university. If they all wanted an RDM platform, how are we going to support it? And obviously we can't. You have to be strategic about it. You'll actually know inside of your own institution which disciplines are actually more important to you, which are the ones that are actually giving you the best research income, what are the ones that are important for your prestige and that. And that might be a way of actually selecting which researchers you align with and actually support a solution for. Having said that, when we actually look at these particular solutions, there's going to be a gap. And so we have to think about the long tail, and what are we going to do about the long tail? So it's very likely we're also going to have to provide an RDM platform, a versatile one that actually suits the long tail. Now that's fine in theory, but even with that long tail, there's still quite a bit of variety of cultures in that there. So you may have to do more than just the one. What we're finding though is with many researchers, They don't really care about metadata at the moment. You know, it's still, you know, early days for them. They're not in a community, it's not sophisticated. All they want is that secure, reliable data storage. So the bottom line for us at Monash is if we want to provide them with infrastructure, it's just basically secure and reliable and a large amount of data storage. As simple as that. So another component is the institutional data collection, and the way I view that is it's basically a collection of an institution's metadata that describes collections that they've actually got registered publicly. It's not necessarily the data. Within inside of Australia, a lot of institutions are actually deploying infrastructure like this. The way we sort of see this particular infrastructure is if you're a researcher and you actually work in a particular domain and you're going to want to browse research data in that domain, you're not going to go into an institutional repository. You're actually going to go into a domain-specific repository, which is quite comprehensive. Or if you're going to start searching on research data, you're basically not going to search on high-level descriptive metadata. You're actually going to want to go and get rich metadata describing that particular data and actually search on that. So we think that these institutional data collections are important for collecting the research impact or outcomes in that, and also for showcasing researchers, but not necessarily for data reuse. Deployment considerations, there's many different environments that we can actually deploy this infrastructure in. It's becoming very easy for us, as I mentioned before, to deploy things outside of the university. You know, thinking about if you want to deploy something, you can basically deploy it on the cloud. Getting software isn't hard. There's a lot of open source software out there these days, etc. If you want to get a community behind it, you get GitHub, so that helps you with the community support. You can market it on Facebook, and you can get customer service through Twitter. So it's making it very easy for researchers to actually go different ways. And also within inside the institution, this also has to consider different aspects of how it provides that as well. Supporting technical RDM services and that, it's these sorts of systems, and you're probably getting the feel for it, they're very different, they're more bespoke systems. And the engagement that you actually have with those particular people that are providing it, it's a community-based thing, is very different as well. And you tend to find that a lot of universities don't provide support in this particular way. They're used to providing support for either enterprise systems or for solutions that have actually developed themselves. None of these, we've adopted a system from outside. You'll probably find that many IT groups, they'd rather develop their own system than adopt somebody else's system. So you find it within inside of institutions, it's a very different approach, and a lot of the senior IT directors and that are now getting this, and that the way they see it is actually having a separate group to support this sort of infrastructure, and that specifically affects research data management. I'm actually running very low on time now, but just a quick overview of the infrastructure that's in Monash. We've actually got a website, and that website's got information about training, what is research data management, the legal obligations, etc. described there. Also our policies and data management, as well as for our strategy, are all hosted there. We've got a large research data store, and I'll mention that in a minute. We've also got a repository. It's like an institutional repository, but it doesn't perform that particular role at the moment. And it's more of a legacy aspect, and that could change in future. We've got a range of research data management platforms. We've also got a range of versatile solutions, and there's research information systems that are important because they support enriching that particular information that's available from those repositories, in particular information about the research and the grants, authentication capabilities, as well as capabilities within inside the university. And just jumping through these, I explained this before, so I might jump through it. A research data store, as I mentioned before, if you're doing research data management, this is very much step one in the process. Provide a large, secure, reliable data storage that the researchers can access. It may not be within inside of your university. Once again, there might be certain aspects of that based on the ethics and legality side. At Monash, we've got 4 petabytes. We've got a mixture between market as well as the bulk, the archival capability. Whenever you have a copy of a file in our data store, you've actually got 4 copies of that file, and that's more for the integrity of the data, and that's covered over 2 data centres. We've got a solution called MyTardis, and that's basically, it started for protein crystallography, but now it's been spread out to many other different fields. I mean, our approach was to be domain specific, but what we found is that researchers in those particular domains actually have colleagues that are actually connected with them. They might be in electron microscopy, they could be in optical microscopy, or they could be in proteomics. And so what we've actually found is that with MyTardis, it's actually spread out to different disciplines now. It's more of a bioscience sort of solution, which is great for cross-discipline work. It's actually set up at our synchrotron. Once again, you can have a lot more look at this later and Twitter and that. But this is sort of showing that what happens for our research data that comes off our synchrotron now, it basically automatically goes into a MyTardis repository at the synchrotron. Oh, sorry, that's it there, and as well as the metadata. The researcher that's linked with it, if they've got a repository at their institution, it's automatically pushed to their institution. Once it's in that repository, we've got compute connected in with it, our research information system for enriching the metadata. We can pass it on to Research Data Australia here, which is ANZ, our ANZ connection. And also we've got this is more of an institutional perspective, but we've also got a community portal called TARDIS, which actually federates that information. And you can also make that data available in publications as well. And other universities, and it's much larger than this now, adopting this all around Australia. And this is sort of showing you the different instruments in that now that we're actually covering. Many of them are more involved in the bioscience, the imaging space. And I might just quickly jump through this. What this is sort of showing you is that within these particular disciplines, we've actually got a whole lot of different formats for the characterisation that's actually done there. Some of you people may be familiar with these particular formats. This is actually being supported by different groups in Australia, and I won't go through the details of those. But you can sort of see that different disciplines actually have a need for that sort of supporting that sort of data. And this is spread around Australia. It's a big country. And what we're finding now with some of our new funding and that for Nectar, which is supporting collaborative research, is basically that it's starting to come together. I mentioned before that when you actually got a large amount of data, what's become evident is you don't want to really move it around the place. You really want to store it close to where it's being born digitally. So wherever the instrument is, have the data co-located to it, and also the compute as well. And for many others, they also want to visualise things, either 3D rendering or getting some of these other images and that are available. And so it sort of makes sense to have that all in one place, or very closely co-located and that. But how do you then access it? And the idea is to have like a remote desktop with all these tools at your disposal. And when you think about these research data management platforms, they're becoming very much just a component of this. You don't really think of it as a platform now. It's just a component of it that works in with the researcher workflow. And these are being developed for particular disciplines now in Australia. I mentioned that there's certain capabilities within inside the university that are supporting this. You can have a look at this at your own leisure later on, and I'm happy to answer some questions about it as well. The other thing is that we've got a strategy in place at Monash, and you can sort of see that the next few years, the sort of work where our emphasis is on, it's about improving that excellence and the impact that we do, providing that world-class infrastructure for various reasons, including attracting the best researchers, enabling us to do what we need to do and achieve it, enhancing the training aspects of what we do and that awareness, etc. And also the integrity is important, but also continuing to lead is very much important for us, and we very much play a leading role in the Australian National Data Service as well. And just concluding, as I said before, at the very least, if you're thinking about research data management infrastructure for university, think about providing a large secure data store for your institution. Institutions can expect to basically be supporting a range of different research data management platforms for their researchers. You're not going to be able to provide all of them, so you're going to have to think strategically about which ones you do support and which ones you don't. Adopt, adapt, develop. So think about adopting a solution first before you go and develop it from scratch. And finally, you have to be flexible in the approaches that you actually take to deploying and supporting these particular solutions. And final slides, just acknowledging these particular people here: Dr. Reese Francis, Dr. Richard Northam, Professor Paul Bonington, William McMillan, Wojtek Kaczynski, Steve Androulakis and Sam Searle, who all contributed to the content of this particular presentation. If you want to contact me, I've got my Twitter account there, LinkedIn, and you can also have a look at our website. Thank you very much.